Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Technology issues. This is our very means of conquest. And today we're reading several verses from the 10th canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, starting at Canto 10, Chapter 65, and I'll begin with text 20, and I'll continue until I get to 27, and then we can be responsive when it comes to the verse. Does that sound fair? 2 people said yes? It's a democracy? Okay. Gandhaṁ madhu-dhārāyā vāyunopahṛtaṁ balaḥ āghrāyopagatas tatra lalanābhiḥ samam papau. The wind carried to Balarāma the fragrance of that flood of sweet liquor. And when he smelled it, he went to the trees. There he and his female companions drank. 21. Upagīyamāno gandharvair vanitā-śobhi-maṇḍale reme kareṇu-yūtheśo māhendra iva vāyunā. As the Gandharvas sang his glories, Lord Balarāma joyed within the brilliant circle of young women. He appeared just like Indra's elephant, the lordly Airavata, enjoying in the company of she-elephants. 22. Nedhur dundubayo vyomi vavrishu kusamer muda gandharva muneyo ramam tadviryar idare tada. At that time, kettle drums resounded in the sky. The Gandharvas joyfully rained down flowers, and the great sages praised Lord Balarāma's heroic deeds. 23. Upagīyamāno charito vanitā-bhir halayuda vaneshu vyacharat shivo madha-vivala lochana. As his deeds were sung, Lord Halayuda wandered as if inebriated among the various forests with his girlfriends. His eyes rolled from the effects of the liquor. 24-25. Sragyeka kundalo matto vajayantya chamalaya bibratsmita mukhambojam sweda praleya bushitam sa juhavayamunam jalakridartam ishvara nijam bhakyam anadritya matta ityu pagambala anagatam alagrena kupito vichakarshaha. Intoxicated with joy, Lord Balarāma sported flower garlands, including the famous Vajayanti. He wore a single earring, and beads of perspiration decorated his smiling lotus face like snowflakes. The Lord then summoned the Jamuna River so that he could play in her waters. But she disregarded his command, thinking he was drunk. This angered Balarāma, and he began dragging the river with the tip of his plow. 26. Pape twamam ajagnyaya yanayasi malahuta nyeshye tvam langalagrena shatata kamacharini. Lord Balarāma said, O sinful one, disrespecting me, you do not come when I call you, but rather move only by your own whim. Therefore, with the tip of my plow, I shall bring you here in 100 streams. Haribol. 27. Evam nir parshita bhita yamuna yaudunandanam uvacha chakita vacham patita padayondripa. Translation. Shukdev Goswami continued, thus scolded by the Lord, O king, the frightened river goddess Jamuna came and fell at the feet of Sri Balarāma, the beloved descendant of Yadu. Trembling, she spoke to him the following words. Purport. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the goddess who appeared before Lord Balarāma as an expansion of Srimati Kalindi, one of Lord Krishna's queens in Dwarka. Srila Jiva Goswami calls her a shadow of Kalindi, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti confirms that she is an expansion of Kalindi, not Kalindi herself. Srila Jiva Goswami also gives evidence from Sri Harivamsha in the statement Pratyutvachanava Vadhum, that goddess Jamuna is the wife of the ocean. The Harivamsha therefore also refers to her as Sagarangana. Sagarangana. Everyone please say. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to all the assembled devotees. Vancha kalpataruscha kripasinnavevicha patitanam pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha anantakoti Vaishnavini ki jai. What is all this intoxication? No intoxication, right? Somebody was taking initiation a year ago, and when saying his vows, he wasn't saying no, but he was just saying meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. So we said, wait a minute. He said no to everything. So there's a way in which this description of Balarāma's, the Supreme Personality of Godhead's intoxication in the spiritual world may come as a surprise to someone who's unacquainted with the philosophy of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and Bhagavad Gita. As Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, Urdhva mula madashakam ashvatam prahar avyayam chandamsi yasya parnani yastam veda savedavit. In other words, in the material world, everyone's got it backwards. The material world, as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, is a reflection. There's 180 degrees, which is the spiritual world reflected into the 180 degrees of the material world. And the material world, with all its enticements, seems like a good idea to the uninformed. As sometimes people say who end up in jail or almost dead, it seemed like a good idea at the time. There's a verisimilitude. That means it looks almost like the real thing. In fact, almost exactly like the real thing. But the intoxication we're hearing about here in these famous 7 verses, was it 7? 20, 21, 8 verses, are memorialized, immemorialized. Is that a word? Is it memorialized or immemorialized? Memorialized. In Jayadev Goswami's Gita Govinda, where he says, Vasativa pushi vasane, vasanam jaladabam, halahati biti milita yamunabam, keshavadrita, jaya jagadisha hare. He gives this description. That's Jayadeva Goswami, who goes on to write the intimate pastimes of Krishna in the spiritual world with his lovers, to inform us of the magnificence of the Lord. And this particular verse from the Dasavatar Stotram describes how Balarāma, who we know as the first expansion of Krishna, we know this from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which Kaviraj Goswami in his Mangalacharana, Sankarshana Kananato Ashai, Garboda Shai Chapayobdi Shai, Sheshashtiya Shamsa Kalasa Nitya, Nandakya Rama Sharanam Mamastu. He's describing how Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he expands himself, as we know from the Vedas, Eko Bahushyam, the one becomes many for his own enjoyment. And his first expansion is Balarāma, who is Vaibhav Prakash. He's exactly like Krishna, except, which always sounds funny to me, he's exactly like Krishna, except for the fact that he's white. That's kind of a difference. And he's also got a different mood, which is that he's the servitor of Krishna. And that's reflected in this verse, or described in the verse here by Jayadeva Goswami when he says that the Lord Balarāma, who's Haladhara, the wielder of the plow, is white, and his dress is as blue as the, starts with a Y, ends with an A. And it used to be closer to Krishna Balarāma. 3 people got it. His dress is as blue as the Jamuna. And he strikes fear into the heart of Jamuna Devi with his plow. And that's the pastime being enacted here, recalled, memorialized by Jayadev when he mentions this rasa lila of Balarāma. He came to Vrindavan to assuage the feelings of separation of the inhabitants there. And at Ramghat, he had staged a evening which lasted for a day of Brahma, of dancing, and here we find intoxication. So again, where's this intoxication coming from? You can look in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is a description of how it is that the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, Urdhva Madashakam. It's a banyan tree with its roots upwards and its branches down. And he describes, does Rupa Goswami, that all of the feelings and symptoms of various attitudes that we see here in the material world are there originally in the spiritual world. That's consistent with my argument so far that the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. And in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami describes how there are 33 vyabhicharis, or symptoms of ecstatic love for Krishna. And one of them is, wait for it, intoxication. And we find this description in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada, his summary of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, describes how Balarāma, when he becomes intoxicated, Prabhupada writes, apparently from drinking honey, or this Varuni beverage, which is described in this verse as coming from the hollow of the tree, he begins to, he becomes loquacious. He starts talking to the ants on the ground. And he says, "My dear king of the ants, why are you hiding in these holes?" And then from looking at the ground, he turns up to the sky and he rails at Indra in his ecstasy of intoxication. And he said, "Indra, why are you laughing? You're laughing at me. Why? I'll smash the whole universe. And Krishna won't mind." And then he turns to Krishna in his ecstasy of intoxication and he says, "Why is the moon elongated, Krishna? And why is the world trembling right now?" And noticing that the yadus are laughing at him, he turns to the yadus and says, "Why are you laughing at me?" And Rupa Goswami says, "May we take a benediction from Sri Baladev in his intoxicated state, that he may always bless and protect us." Which we can then ascertain means that this is one of the powerful emotions, vyabhicharis of the spiritual world, recognized by Rupa Goswami and enacted by Balarāma and others in the spiritual world. The power of Lord Balarāma also is called on in this verse. And he was able to pull the Jamuna with his plow. That's not ordinary. One of the points of Jayadev Goswami is to point out the magnificent acts of Krishna's various avatars in the world. The Dasavatar Stotram. And his using his plow weapon is mentioned elsewhere in the Bhagavatam. If you'll recall the pastime of Samba, who was a Kshatriya, from a Kshatriya family and became impatient. He wanted to marry the daughter of Duryodhana, named Lakshmana. And Balarāma, at that time, we'll get to that in a minute, but Samba, being impatient, as I was saying, not wanting to wait for any formality, which was part of the Kshatriya code, had to show some valor to marry a young woman. So he went to visit the Kauravas and summarily grabbed Lakshmana, put her on his chariot and drove off with her. Yay. Kidnapped her. The Rakshasa wedding. So when the Kauravas came to find out that he had stolen Duryodhana's daughter, they raised a hue and cry, and some of the great warriors went out after him. And even Bhishma, who was in that assembly, had told them, what he did was not right. Capture him, but don't kill him. So they rode off after Samba. And he stood like a young lion against these Maharati soldiers and fought them off valiantly, attacking their horses and chariots and drivers and so forth. Then finally he succumbed to the power of these great warriors who tied him up and took him back to their kingdom along with his prize, Lakshmana. And when the news got to Ugrasena and to Krishna, they sent some ambassadors. They chose Balarāma, who said, I'll take care of this. And he went there along with Uddhava to have an attorney present for the discussion. And he went there, sending forth Uddhava to speak to the Kauravas, who went and said, King Ugrasena doesn't mind that you did this, as long as you just Samba and Lakshmana. Just hand him over. He won't mind. And the Kauravas said, won't mind? Who is he to tell us? The only reason that anybody considers him a king and he can hold on to the insignias of kingship with the white chamra and other symbols is because we've empowered them. But now, those who have been empowered by us think that they are the kings of the world. Who is this Ugrasena? He's like the shoes. And now, the shoes he wants to put upon our head? No, we won't give him back. Uddhava came and formed Balarāma. Argumentum, who speaks Latin? Argumentum ad vachanam. Is that the one with the stick? Yeah. Thank you. We have a Latin speaker in the front row. Wasn't a stick, but it was his plow. And at that time, he used his plow to smash the earth and then start pulling Hastinapur. And as it moved, the building started to topple, and everyone felt that the world was coming to an end. And at that time, they disgorged Samba and Lakshmana. Oh, please, help yourself. We'll even help with the wedding ceremony. Filled with the fear of Balarāma's plow. This incident, this pastime, is mentioned in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Of all places in the discussion of Ajamil, 6th canto, 2nd chapter, which is the Vishnu Dutas describing to the Yamadutas why it is that Ajamil is not culpable for the sinful reactions that would be awaiting an ordinary person. And in that verse, it is mentioned that the names of the Lord are so powerful that if one invokes them, like Hare Krishna, that's your cue. Then all sinful reactions by the power of the holy name are vanquished. And he remembers that story of Lord Balarāma's power against the Kauravas and dragging Hastinapur. And he says that we can remember Balarāma's power. In fact, he says Krishna Balarāma's power. We can recall his pastimes and remember that if we take shelter of him, especially by chanting Hare Krishna, then whatever sinful reactions are to be meted out by Yamaraj for others are not applicable to such a person because of the power of Lord Balarāma. So these pastimes help us to transfer, as Prabhupada writes in the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, our minds from the material world to the spiritual world through hearing these pastimes. And in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Shukadeva Goswami says, Anugrahaya bhaktanam manusham dehamastita bhajate tadrashi krida yashutva tatparo bhavet. Anugrahaya means what? Mercy. Like graha means grabbers, like the planets we call grahas. They pull us in different directions. Anugrahaya means is a way in which somebody drags us in the right direction. We call a form of mercy. Anugrahaya bhaktanam, for all the devotees, Anugrahaya bhaktanam manusham dehamasrita. Krishna comes with a human-like form. Manusham dehamasrita. Bhajate tadrashi krida. And he performs pastimes, delightful pastimes, yashutva tatparobhavet, because when he does that, then we have something to talk about. Otherwise, the default mode is talk about what? Name 3 things popular in this world. Politics, sports, and movies. That's it. Yeah. Yashutva tatparobhavet. But now because he's come and he's performed these extraordinary pastimes, anyone who wants to transfer him or herself from the material world to the spiritual world can take advantage and remember these pastimes and recite them. Otherwise, as Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Shukadeva Goswami, or the demigods praying to Lord Krishna within the womb say, there's no hope. Yene ravindaksha vimuktamaninas toyasta bhava davashudha budaya aruya krishchena parampadam tata patantyato nadrita yushmad āghrāya. And that is that unless you're able to not only envision the beauty of the Lord, his form, but also his pastimes in this world, and remember them, then whatever kind of meditation you're doing, or practice of yoga, or if you make a lot of money to become liberated, that's one idea. If you get enough money, then you can be liberated for a while. Forget about it. Aruya krishchena param. It's just hard work, and you're going to fall down from that position. But the place you don't fall down from is when you become absorbed in the pastimes of Lord Balarāma, and you can remember the sweetness of his pastimes as continuing the same thought, yet pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayam gratitamugratayanti santa tadvanna rikta matayo yatayo pirura shroto ganas tamaranam bhajavasudevam, which means in the positive sense that when you're able to relish the vilas, or it's called vilas, the beauty of Lord Krishna's pastimes. In this case, Balarāma as intoxicated is intriguing, isn't it? Say yes. Yeah. It's a drunken party, and he drags the Jamuna, and it's intriguing. If one can become intrigued by the beauty, the humor, all the aspects, the subtleties of the Lord's pastimes, by hearing about them, yashrutva parobhavet, then yet pada pankacha balasa vilasya bhakta karmashayam, the hard knot in the heart. If you've ever sensed that no matter how hard I chant, it seems to be still there. There's a way in which that becomes cut by the process. Vidite hridaya grantish chidyante sarvasam shaya shiyante chasyakarmani drishta eva manishvare. When one comes to full awareness of the Lord's position here in the material world, which is announced at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, Kritavan kilakaramani saharami nakeshava atimartyani bhagavan guda kapatamanushata. The sages in Naimirasanya say, get ready, as we're going to be talking about the wonderful, what is the word? Kritavan kilakaramani saharami nakeshava. Means? Huh? Superhuman activities of the Lord. And they're disguised as human beings, it says. Ati martyani bhagavan guda kapatamanushaha. It seems like they're humans, but they do superhuman things. It says, this is what we're going to be describing as the pinnacle of discussion, of any discussion. And by becoming absorbed in that, one becomes charmed and attracted to the spiritual world. And even though there are urges that come naturally from the power of the material nature, Karamashrayam gratitam udgratayanti santa, the saintly persons who hear about Krishna, who have a sense of enjoyment. When they see the Lord's lotus feet, they remember his pastimes and so forth. They're not swept away by these powerful waves of desire in the material world. Another piece of evidence from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Vikriditam vrajava durbiraham cha Vishnu shadhanvito nrishindayad atavarnayedya bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kamam hrid rogam ashvapahinot yacharinadhira. Shukadeva Goswami, in describing the pastimes of Krishna in the Rasa Leela, says, if with shraddha, with proper context, and understanding that these are not ordinary pastimes between boys and girls, if with the proper guidance, shraddhanvito nashrinu yadatavarnayedya, you can become absorbed in hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. He says then very quickly, achareṇa-dhīra, you become immune from the dread disease of the material world lust, can overcome that, which is practically impossible. And Prabhupada, a couple last points, and then we can have, if you're willing, some reflections and questions. Prabhupada had mentioned on the Jaladuta that the Bhagavatam itself will be the panacea for the world's problems. Does the world have any problems now? How many? Approximately how many? A lot. So they can all be solved by the problem, by the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the vibration of the Bhagavatam, propagation of the Bhagavatam. And there is a time in which hearing from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and the pastimes of the Lord, it's described, tada rajas tamo bhava, the lower modes of nature begin to diminish. They are diminished. But when I hear that word tada, it reminds me of when I was a kid, and there's an expression that people would make when there's an appearance of something great where they go, ta-da! Like I'm announcing something. Does that ring a bell from your childhood, Shankarshan? Ta-da! So, tada rajas tamo bhava, Havi gets it. Tada rajas tamo bhava, at that time it says, but there's a time at which our lives switch from being enamored of the material pastimes, politics, movies, what's the other third one? And sports. Politics, movies, sports. That's the three topics of the material world. No longer interesting, that we become interested in the spiritual world, and then ta-da, you're free from the obligation to talk about those things. You got something better to do. In fact, real renunciation means I got somewhere better to go. I got something better to hear. That's the higher engagement. So we can remember Balarāma's, these 8 verses memorialized in Jayadev Goswami's introduction. We can remember the power of Lord Balarāma. And we can also remember Prabhupada's application of this in the following story from the Lilamrita. Would you like a story? Yes. But not very much, right? Very much, okay. Right here in Vrindavan, circa 1974, when this temple was being built, Prabhupada's, according to the devotees who were present, mood changed and it became more stern and demanding, as he wanted this place built right away, and he saw anomalies in the way the devotees were organizing. So he would point at things, he would chastise people, he'd call people out regularly. And one of the devotees was noticeably absent from the meetings that Prabhupada was holding from time to time here in Vrindavan. That was Jamuna Devi. I don't know if you can tell yet how this is shaping up to match the story in the beginning. Jamuna Devi, the great devotee, wife of Gurudas Prabhu, one of the great pioneers of the movement. Prabhupada inquired, where's Jamuna Devi? She's not coming to the programs, Prabhupada, because you're too stern, and right now she's afraid of your mood. So he called for her, and she came there and said, even if I am stern, and even if I am demanding right now, you still have to come. In fact, and then he recalled the pastime of Balarāma in this verse, demanding that Jamuna come to him and using his plow. And so in the same way, I'm demanding you come to me and you come to these programs. I know, you can't make this stuff up. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Gaura-Nitai, Shri Shri Krishna Balarāma, Shri Shri Radhe Shyam. If you so desire, please let us remember the pastime of Lord Balarāma dragging Jamuna, and remember the great power and mercy of Lord Balarāma to drag us closer to his lotus feet. Please let us pray for argumentum ad vachalam from Lord Balarāma's plow. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in part or in whole. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Vanjagabdurusha kripasnabe vachapatitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.